a cop in Hollow Creek, Arkansas, for just over 3 months now. Population 1,892. At least that's what the faded sign at the town limits claims, though I've never seen more than a couple hundred people, even on our busiest days. I took this job because I needed to escape. My marriage had fallen apart back in Little Rock, and the weight of failure pressed down on me every time I drove past our old house. When the job posting appeared for a deputy position in a quiet rural town, it seemed like divine intervention. The sheriff, Jim Caldwell, hired me on the spot. Didn't even check my references, just looked me up and down, asked if I had good instincts, and when I nodded, he handed me a badge. I should have found that strange, but desperation makes fools of us all. The first 2 weeks were peaceful enough. Traffic violations, a couple of drunk and disorderlies at the local bar, and one domestic dispute that ended before I arrived. Hollow Creek seemed like the perfect place to rebuild my life. Quiet, simple, predictable. Then, Deputy Miller disappeared. One day, he was there, joking about his wife's terrible cooking, and the next, his desk was empty. When I asked Sheriff Caldwell about it, he just shrugged and said, "Miller moved on." Some folks aren't cut out for Hollow Creek. That same day, I found a leather-bound notebook in my locker. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. Inside, handwritten in careful print, was a list of rules. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank the other deputies were playing on the new guy. Rules for Policing Hollow Creek. The title alone made me chuckle, but as I flipped through the pages, my amusement curdled into unease. These weren't standard police procedures. They were something else entirely. Rule number 1. Never respond to calls from Marsh Road between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. Radio in that you're handling another emergency. Rule number 2. If you see a child walking alone after sunset, do not approach them. Note their location and direction, but do not follow. Rule number 3. During the first quarter moon, refuse all requests to enter the forest, no matter how urgent. There were more. 23 rules in total, each more bizarre than the last. I closed the notebook and shoved it back in my locker, convinced it was an elaborate hazing ritual. That night, I received my first call from Marsh Road. A disturbance, the dispatcher said. Possible break-in. It was 1:17 a.m. I almost went. Would have, if the notebook hadn't been sitting heavy in my mind. Instead, I radioed in that I was handling a drunk driver on the other side of town. The next morning, Sheriff Caldwell clapped me on the shoulder. "Good work last night, Deputy Carson," he said, his eyes holding mine a beat too long. "You've got good instincts." I've been following the rules ever since. Not because I believe in superstition, but because I've seen what happens to those who don't. This is my story, my warning. Because in Hollow Creek, the rules aren't just regulations, they're survival. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. My morning routine in Hollow Creek was simple. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., brew coffee strong enough to dissolve the spoon, shower under lukewarm water because the ancient water heater in my rental never quite did its job, and then drive the 5 minutes to the station. Sometimes I'd stop at Mabel's Diner for breakfast, runny eggs and toast that was always just slightly burnt. But Mabel had a smile that made you forget about the food. That morning, 1 week after finding the notebook, I skipped breakfast. My stomach was twisted into knots after what happened the previous night. Usual patrol route, when dispatch called in a noise complaint from an address on Willow Street. As I pulled up to the small blue house, I noticed the porch light flickering in an odd rhythm. On, off, Off. Like Morse code. The hairs on my neck prickled. Rule number 7. If a house's porch light flickers in a pattern, drive away immediately. Report that no one answered the door. I sat in my cruiser for a moment, fingers drumming on the wheel. The notebook hadn't specified Willow Street. Maybe this was just a faulty bulb. But as I watched, the pattern repeated, exact and deliberate. I reversed out of the driveway and called dispatch. "No one home at the Willow Street address," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Appears to be a false alarm. Sheriff Caldwell was waiting at my desk when I arrived at the station that morning. He wasn't smiling. "Good call on Willow Street last night," he said, voice low enough that Deputy Ramirez, the only other person in the office, couldn't hear. "But next time, don't hesitate. Hesitation gets people killed in this town." I nodded, swallowing hard. What would have happened if I'd gone to the door? Caldwell's weathered face revealed nothing. "You followed the rules. That's what matters." He stood to leave, then paused. "The Millers are having their annual barbecue this weekend. You should come. Meet some of the townsfolk." After he left, I pulled out the notebook, reading through the rules again. Some were straightforward. Don't patrol certain areas at specific times. Others were cryptic. If you hear your name called 3 times in succession while alone, fire your gun into the air immediately, regardless of regulations. First time's always the hardest. I jumped, slamming the notebook shut. Deputy Ramirez had wheeled his chair over, a sympathetic smile on his face. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a neatly trimmed beard and dark circles under his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Ramirez's smile faded. "Listen, Carson. Drop the act. We all know about the rules. We all follow them. It's the only reason we're still alive." I studied him, looking for signs he was messing with me. Found none. "What happened to Deputy Miller?" Ramirez glanced at the empty desk across the room. Miller thought he knew better. Thought the rules were bullshit. He leaned closer. "Got a call from the old church on Palmer Road. Rule 16 says, never enter the old church, even during daylight hours," I finished. "Right. But Miller, he thought it was just superstition. Went in anyway." Ramirez's voice dropped to a whisper. "They found his cruiser 2 days later, engine running, driver's door open. Never found him." "Jesus," I muttered. "Hollow Creek's not like other places," Ramirez continued. "Things happen here that don't make sense. Follow the rules, you'll be fine. Break them." He drew a finger across his throat. I spent the rest of my shift mulling over Ramirez's words, half convinced the entire department was playing an elaborate prank. But then why the seriousness in Caldwell's eyes? Why the genuine fear in Ramirez's voice? At 8 p.m., as I prepared to head home, dispatch called in another disturbance. This time, on Evergreen Drive. No flickering lights, no red flags, just a standard noise complaint. The house was a small ranch style, toys scattered across the front yard. A normal family home. I approached the front door, knocked twice. A woman answered, maybe 35, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Everything about her seemed ordinary until she spoke. "You're not supposed to be here, deputy." Her voice was flat, emotionless. I blinked, caught off guard. "Ma'am?" Dispatch received a noise complaint. She shook her head slowly. "No one called. You should check the rules again." She stepped back, closing the door with deliberate slowness. I stood there, confusion washing over me. As I turned to leave, I noticed a small figurine on the porch railing. A crow, carved from what looked like obsidian, its eyes tiny pinpricks of white. Rule number 14. If you see a blackbird figurine, leave immediately. Do not touch it. Do not acknowledge it. Cold fear trickled down my spine. I walked quickly to my cruiser, feeling watched from every darkened window. As I drove away, I checked my rearview mirror. The woman stood on her porch, still as a statue, staring after me. Back at my small rental house, I double-checked the locks twice before collapsing onto my couch. I pulled out the notebook, flipping to Rule 14, reading the additional notes I'd missed. Houses marked with the crow are testing you. They are not occupied by who you think they are. Never accept food or drink if offered. Never step fully inside. I closed the notebook, mind racing. Tomorrow I'd attend the Miller's barbecue. Maybe there I'd find some answers. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. These rules weren't a joke, and breaking them could cost me more than just my job. My morning routine in Hollow Creek was simple. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., brew coffee strong enough to dissolve the spoon, shower under lukewarm water because the ancient water heater in my rental never quite did its job, and then drive the 5 minutes to the station. Sometimes I'd stop at Mabel's diner for breakfast. Runny eggs and toast that was always just slightly burnt. But Mabel had a smile that made you forget about the food. That morning, 1 week after finding the notebook, I skipped breakfast. My stomach was twisted into knots after what happened the previous night. I'd been driving my usual patrol route when dispatch called in a noise complaint from an address on Willow Street. As I pulled up to the small blue house, I noticed the porch light flickering in an odd rhythm. On, off, on, off. Like Morse code. The hairs on my neck prickled. Rule number 7. If a house's porch light flickers in a pattern, drive away immediately. Report that no one answered the door. I sat in my cruiser for a moment, fingers drumming on the wheel. The notebook hadn't specified Willow Street. Maybe this was just a faulty bulb. But as I watched, the pattern repeated, exact and deliberate. I reversed out of the driveway and called dispatch. "No one home at the Willow Street address," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Appears to be a false alarm." Sheriff Caldwell was waiting at my desk when I arrived at the station that morning. He wasn't smiling. "Good call on Willow Street last night," he said, voice low enough that Deputy Ramirez, the only other person in the office, couldn't hear. "But next time, don't hesitate. Hesitation gets people killed in this town." I nodded, swallowing hard. What would have happened if I'd gone to the door? Caldwell's weathered face revealed nothing. "You followed the rules. That's what matters." He stood to leave, then paused. "The Millers are having their annual barbecue this weekend. You should come. Meet some of the townsfolk." After he left, I pulled out the notebook, reading through the rules again. Some were straightforward. Don't patrol certain areas at specific times. Others were cryptic. If you hear your name called 3 times in succession while alone, fire your gun into the air immediately, regardless of regulations. First time's always the hardest. I jumped, slamming the notebook shut. Deputy Ramirez had wheeled his chair over, a sympathetic smile on his face. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a neatly trimmed beard and dark circles under his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Ramirez's smile faded. "Listen, Carson, drop the act. We all know about the rules. We all follow them. It's the only reason we're still alive." I studied him, looking for signs he was messing with me. Found none. "What happened to Deputy Miller?" Ramirez glanced at the empty desk across the room. Miller thought he knew better. Thought the rules were bullshit. He leaned closer. "Got a call from the old church on Palmer Road. Rule 16 says, never enter the old church even during daylight hours," I finished. "Right. But Miller, he thought it was just superstition. Went in anyway." Ramirez's voice dropped to a whisper. "They found his cruiser 2 days later, engine running, Driver's door open. Never found him. Jesus, I muttered. Hollow Creek's not like other places, Ramirez continued. Things happen here that don't make sense. Follow the rules, you'll be fine. Break them. He drew a finger across his throat. I spent the rest of my shift mulling over Ramirez's words, half convinced the entire department was playing an elaborate prank. But then why the seriousness in Caldwell's eyes? Why the genuine fear in Ramirez's voice? At 8 p.m., as I prepared to head home, dispatch called in another disturbance, this time on Evergreen Drive. No flickering lights, no red flags, just a standard noise complaint. The house was a small ranch style, toys scattered across the front yard, a normal family home. I approached the front door, knocked twice. A woman answered, maybe 35, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Everything about her seemed ordinary until she spoke. "You're not supposed to be here, deputy." Her voice was flat, emotionless. I blinked, caught off guard. "Ma'am?" Dispatch received a noise complaint. She shook her head slowly. "No one called. You should check the rules again." She stepped back, closing the door with deliberate slowness. I stood there, confusion washing over me. As I turned to leave, I noticed a small figurine on the porch railing. A crow, carved from what looked like obsidian, its eyes tiny pinpricks of white. Rule number 14. If you see a blackbird figurine, leave immediately. Do not touch it. Do not acknowledge it. Cold fear trickled down my spine. I walked quickly to my cruiser, feeling watched from every darkened window. As I drove away, I checked my rearview mirror. The woman stood on her porch, still as a statue, staring after me. Back at my small rental house, I double-checked the locks twice before collapsing onto my couch. I pulled out the notebook, flipping to Rule 14, reading the additional notes I'd missed. Houses marked with the crow are testing you. They are not occupied by who you think they are. Never accept food or drink if offered. Never step fully inside. I closed the notebook, mind racing. Tomorrow I'd attend the Miller's barbecue. Maybe there I'd find some answers. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. These rules weren't a joke, and breaking them could cost me more than just my job. Saturday arrived with oppressive humidity that clung to my skin like a second layer. The Miller's place sat at the edge of town, a sprawling farmhouse with a wraparound porch and several acres of land, backing up to the dense forest that surrounded most of Hollow Creek. I arrived fashionably late, partly because I wasn't eager to socialize, partly because rule number 19 advised, never be the first to arrive at a town gathering. Wait until at least 7 others have entered before you join. The driveway was lined with cars, most I recognized from around town. As I parked and walked toward the house, the scent of barbecue smoke and the low murmur of conversation drifted my way. It seemed normal enough. Just a small town gathering. Sheriff Caldwell spotted me first, raising his beer in greeting. He stood with a group of men near a massive grill, the smoke curling around them like morning fog. "Carson, glad you made it," he called, motioning me over. "Come meet some folks." The introductions blurred together. The mayor, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who owned the local hardware store. A few farmers with calloused hands and weathered faces. The high school principal with a booming laugh. All seemed perfectly ordinary, welcoming even, but there was something in their eyes, a wariness, the way they studied me, like they were waiting for something. "How you settling in, deputy?" the mayor asked, offering me a beer from a nearby cooler. I accepted, remembering to check the cap was still sealed. Another rule, though not one from the notebook. Just common sense. "Still learning the ropes," I replied carefully. Hollow Creek's got its quirks. The hardware store owner, Bill, I think, chuckled. "Takes some getting used to. Every town has its quirks, I said, taking a sip of beer. Though I've never worked anywhere with such specific protocols. A silence fell over the group. The men exchanged glances. The rules keep us safe, the principal finally said, voice dropping. Been that way for generations. Before I could press further, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Food's ready, everyone. The group dispersed toward a long table laden with food. I followed, noticing how the townsfolk moved with practiced precision, forming an orderly line. No one pushed ahead. No one took more than they needed. It reminded me of a well-choreographed dance. As I filled my plate, a small, elderly woman appeared beside me. Her silver hair was pinned back in a neat bun, and despite the heat, she wore a cardigan buttoned to her throat. "You're the new deputy," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. James Carson." Her eyes, cloudy with cataracts, seemed to see right through me. "I'm Margaret Holloway. Been here longer than anyone." She nodded toward a quieter corner of the yard. "Come sit with me. Old ladies like company when they eat." I followed her to a small table under an ancient oak tree. As we settled, I noticed a thin silver chain around her neck, disappearing beneath her cardigan. "You found the notebook," Margaret said once we were seated, her voice matter-of-fact. I froze mid-bite. "How did you—" "I can see it in your eyes. The knowing, the fear." She set down her fork. "Every officer gets one. Been that way since 1887. 1887, I repeated. "That's when the mine collapsed," she finished. 27 men trapped. They dug for days. But when they finally broke through..." Margaret's gaze drifted toward the forest. "They found the tunnel empty. No bodies. Just strange markings on the walls and a single piece of paper with the first rule written on it." I set my plate aside, appetite gone. What was the first rule? Never enter the old mine shaft, even in daylight. What was trapped there is still hungry. Margaret's expression remained neutral, as if reciting a grocery list, instead of something that chilled my blood. And people just accepted this, started following mysterious rules. Margaret's laugh was thin, brittle. Not at first. Sheriff Jones thought it was nonsense, until his deputy disappeared while investigating noises from the mine. Then his son vanished on Marsh Road after dark. She leaned closer. By the time the third rule appeared, people were willing to listen. Appeared? The rules just appear. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes written in frost on windows, even in summer, sometimes whispered by dying men. Margaret touched the chain around her neck. Each generation adds new ones as we learn, as we lose people. The sounds of the barbecue seemed to fade as I processed her words. Why tell me this? Why not the sheriff? Jim Caldwell knows enough, but you... She studied me. You have the sight, like my Harold did. The sight? You can see them when they're trying to hide. That's why you were hired, why you were chosen. Margaret pulled the chain from beneath her cardigan. Hanging from it was a small silver key. Harold was the last deputy with the sight. Before he died, he entrusted me with this. What does it open? When the time comes, you'll know. She pressed the key into my palm. Keep it hidden. There are those in town who would take it if they knew you had it. As I slipped the key into my pocket, a child's scream cut through the air. Not a playful shriek, but a sound of pure terror. Everyone at the barbecue froze. I instinctively reached for my sidearm, but I was off duty, unarmed. The scream came again, from the edge of the property, where the yard met the forest. Without thinking, I ran toward it, dimly aware of Sheriff Caldwell shouting something behind me. At the tree line, I found a young boy, maybe 8 years old, pointing into the woods with a trembling hand. I saw it. He he whispered as I knelt beside him. The thing from the mine. I followed his gaze, but saw only trees and shadows. What did it look like? I asked gently. Like a man, but not. The boy's eyes were wide with fear. No face, just smooth skin, and too many arms. Sheriff Caldwell arrived, breathing heavily. He gripped my shoulder, fingers digging in painfully. "Take the boy back to the party," he ordered, voice tight. "Now." As I led the child away, I glanced back. Caldwell stood at the edge of the forest, hand on his concealed weapon, speaking words I couldn't hear into the darkness. For a split second, I thought I saw movement among the trees, something tall and fluid, like a man stretched too thin. Back at the party, the mood had shifted. People gathered their belongings, making hurried excuses to leave. Margaret was gone. The Miller family stood on their porch, faces grim. As I helped clean up, Mrs. Miller approached me. "You shouldn't have run toward the scream," she said softly, taking a stack of plates from my hands. "Rule number 5. If you hear a child scream near the forest, gather all children you can see and count them. Do not approach the forest until counting is complete." "I didn't know," I said weakly. "No." Her expression softened slightly. "But now you do. That's how it works here. We learn the rules through mistakes, hopefully ones we survive." She glanced toward the forest. "The sheriff's experienced. He'll handle it. This time." As I drove home, the silver key felt heavy in my pocket. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. "You have the sight." What did she mean? What could I see that others couldn't? More importantly, what had the boy seen in the forest? What had emerged from the abandoned mine over a century ago that necessitated rules written in frost and whispered by dying men? Back at my house, I added rule number 5 to my growing list of questions. Then I placed Margaret's key in my bedside drawer and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the movement in the trees. The too tall silhouette with too many limbs, watching us from the darkness. Sunday morning greeted me with a pounding headache and the copper taste of blood in my mouth. I stumbled to the bathroom, expecting to find I'd bitten my tongue in my sleep. Instead, I discovered thin streaks of dried blood trailing from my nose and ears. "What the hell?" I muttered, splashing cold water on my face. As I reached for a towel, I caught movement in the mirror. A dark shape behind me, gone when I spun around. My heart hammered against my ribs as I searched the small bathroom. Nothing. The phone rang, making me jump. It was Ramirez. "You need to come in," he said without preamble. "There's been an incident." 20 minutes later, I walked into chaos at the station. Deputies rushed back and forth. Phones rang unanswered, and Sheriff Caldwell stood at the center, barking orders. His eyes locked on me as I entered, narrowing slightly. "Carson," he called. "My office." Now, I followed him into the small room that served as his headquarters. Maps covered one wall, most marked with strange symbols I didn't recognize. He closed the door behind us. "You broke Rule 5 yesterday," he said bluntly. "I didn't know. Ignorance isn't an excuse here." He sat heavily behind his desk. "The Miller boy is missing." Ice flooded my veins. "What? When?" "Sometime after midnight. Parents heard him talking in his sleep, went to check on him, found an empty bed and the window open." Caldwell's expression was grim. "Search parties are already out, but..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "Let me help," I said. "I was there. I saw..." "That's exactly why you can't be involved." He leaned forward. "Breaking the rules has consequences, Carson. Sometimes they fall on you, sometimes on others. The blood from my nose and ears, the shadow in my bathroom mirror, the missing boy, all connected." "What exactly are we dealing with here?" I demanded. What came out of that mine in 1887? Caldwell's face hardened. You've been talking to Margaret Holloway. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-something years. We don't have a name for it. Some call it the Hollow Man, others the Collector. All we know is it takes people, has rules of its own that we've learned to navigate. But what is it? Some kind of monster? A ghost? Labels don't matter, he snapped. What matters is following the rules. He stood, signaling our conversation was over. Go home, Carson. You're on leave until further notice. You can't. I can and I am. Consider yourself lucky it's just administrative leave. His eyes bored into mine. Others have paid higher prices. I left the station seething, the injustice of it burning in my chest. The Miller boy was missing, and somehow it was my fault. Because I'd run toward a scream instead of following some cryptic rule. Back home, I paced my living room, unable to settle. The key Margaret had given me sat on my coffee table, catching the sunlight. When the time comes, you'll know, she'd said. Maybe that time was now. I decided to visit her, ask more questions about the site and what she knew about the Hollow Man. The elderly often knew the deepest secrets of small towns. Margaret lived in a quaint cottage on the edge of town, a stone's throw from the cemetery. As I pulled into her gravel driveway, I noted the carefully tended garden, the clean windows, the porch swing moving gently in the breeze, despite no one sitting in it. I knocked, waited. No answer. Knocked again, louder. She ain't home. I turned to find a man in overalls watching me from the neighboring yard. He leaned on a rake, squinting in the sunlight. Do you know when she'll be back? I asked. Marge ain't been home since yesterday. Saw her leave for the Miller barbecue, never saw her return. He frowned. You the new deputy? I nodded. Word is you broke a rule. He spat on the ground. Bad business, that. I didn't know about Rule 5, I said, defensive. Not knowing the speed limit don't stop the ticket, he replied. Or the crash. He resumed raking his leaves, clearly done with me. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A glint of silver in Margaret's flower pot. I casually moved closer, pretending to admire the flowers, and spotted a small silver key identical to the one in my pocket. I glanced at the neighbor, but he had his back turned. Quickly, I pocketed the key and returned to my car. Back home, I laid both keys side by side. Identical in every way. What were they for? Why had Margaret given me one while keeping another hidden? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Carson, I answered. It's Ramirez. His voice was hushed, urgent. Meet me at Mabel's diner in 20 minutes. Come alone. He hung up before I could ask questions. At Mabel's, the lunch crowd had thinned to a few stragglers. Ramirez sat in a corner booth, twisting a paper napkin between his fingers. I slid in across from him. What's going on? He looked around nervously before leaning forward. They found something in the woods, not the Miller boy. Something else. What? A door. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Just standing there between two oak trees. No walls, no building. Just a door. The keys seemed to burn in my pocket. Where in the woods? About half a mile from the Miller property, near the old mining trail. He pushed a folded map across the table. I marked it. But Carson, don't go there. Caldwell's ordered everyone to stay away. Why tell me then? Ramirez's eyes met mine. Because Margaret visited me last night. Said you have the site. Said you'd need to know. You've seen Margaret? I grabbed his arm. Where is she now? Don't know. She came to my apartment after midnight. Told me about the door. Said to tell you. Then left. He pulled his arm free. Listen, there's more. The search party found tracks near the Miller house. Not human. Too big, too wrong. And they found this. He slid a small plastic bag across the table. Inside was a tooth. No, too large for a human tooth. More like a fang, curved and yellowed, at least 3 inches long. What animal is this from? I asked, turning the bag over. County Animal Control says nothing native to Arkansas. Ramirez reclaimed the bag, tucking it into his jacket. I've got to get back before someone notices this is missing. Just be careful, Carson. The rules exist for a reason. After he left, I sat nursing a coffee, mind racing. A door in the woods. Margaret missing. The Miller boy taken. A fang from no known animal. And 2 identical silver keys burning a hole in my pocket. Rule number 12 from the notebook flashed in my mind. If you find a door where no door should be, do not approach it. Report its location immediately and avoid the area for 7 days. Another rule I was about to break. I waited until dusk, then drove as close as I could to the location Ramirez had marked. The rest would be on foot. I brought a flashlight, my personal firearm, and both silver keys. The forest was unnaturally quiet as I hiked. No birds, no insects. Not even the rustle of leaves, though a breeze blew steadily. Just profound silence that pressed against my eardrums like cotton wool. I found the door exactly where Ramirez had indicated. It stood between 2 massive oak trees, a simple wooden door with peeling white paint, and a tarnished brass knob. No frame, no walls. Just a door standing impossibly in the middle of the forest. As I approached, the air grew colder. My breath clouded in front of me, though it had been a warm evening. 20 feet away I stopped, remembering Rule 12. There was still time to turn back, report the location, follow the rules. Then I heard it. A child's voice, faint but clear, coming from behind the door. Help me. Please. Someone help me. The Miller boy. Instinct overrode caution. I rushed forward, drawing my gun with one hand while pulling out the keys with the other. As I reached the door, I noticed a small keyhole beneath the knob, tarnished with age. I tried Margaret's key first. It slid in smoothly but wouldn't turn. Heart pounding, I tried the second key from her flower pot. A soft click, and the door swung inward. Beyond wasn't forest as I'd expected, but a long stone corridor lit by torches that cast more shadows than light. The air that rushed out smelled of damp earth and something else, something rotten and sweet at the same time. "Hello?" I called, voice echoing down the corridor. "Miller? Are you in there?" No response. The child's voice had gone silent. Every rational thought screamed at me to close the door, to run. But the sight, Margaret mentioned, whatever it was, compelled me forward. I had been chosen for this, somehow, for whatever waited beyond this door. I stepped through, gun raised, flashlight sweeping the corridor. The stone walls were carved with symbols similar to those on Caldwell's maps. Some seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. 10 steps in, I heard the door slam shut behind me. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. Where the door had been was now only smooth stone wall. No handle, no hinges, no way back. Panic surged, hot and tight in my chest. I pressed my palms against the stone, searching for any crack or seam, finding nothing. "Welcome, Deputy Carson." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, deep, resonant, but with a strange vibration, like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. Few have the courage to enter willingly. I whirled, gun pointed into the darkness ahead. "Who's there? Where's the Miller boy?" A chuckle reverberated through the corridor. "So many questions. But you came seeking answers, didn't you? About the rules, about what happened in 1887. about why you were chosen. A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the corridor. Tall, inhumanly so, with limbs too long and too numerous. Where its face should have been was only smooth, pale skin. The Hollow Man, the Collector, the thing from the mine. And somehow, I knew it had been waiting for me. I'd seen some terrifying things during my years on the Force in Little Rock. Brutal murders, fatal accidents, the worst humanity had to offer. But nothing had prepared me for the Hollow Man. It moved with unnatural fluidity, as if its joints worked differently than human anatomy allowed. In the flickering torchlight, I counted 6 arms, no, 7, sprouting from its elongated torso. Its skin was pallid, almost translucent, stretched too tight over a frame that stood nearly 8 feet tall. But it was the face, or lack thereof, that froze my blood. Just smooth, blank skin where features should be. No eyes to read, no mouth to watch. Yet somehow, I knew it was studying me. "What are you?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, echoing off the stone walls. "A collector of debts." The voice reverberated in my skull rather than my ears. "A keeper of balance, a guardian of the boundary." "Where's the Miller boy?" The featureless head tilted slightly. "The child is safe, for now. His fate depends on you." I tightened my grip on my gun, though instinct told me bullets would be useless against this thing. "What do you want from me?" The same thing I wanted from Harold Holloway, from every seer before him. It gestured with one of its many limbs. "Walk with me, Deputy Carson. There are things you must understand." Against every instinct for self-preservation, I followed as it glided down the corridor. The torches flickered as we passed, shadows dancing across the carved symbols on the walls. "In 1887, men dug too deep," the Hollow Man began. "They breached the boundary between your world and what lies beneath, what exists between." Another limb gestured to the symbols. "They released me, but in doing so, created a tear, a wound between realities." The corridor widened into a circular chamber. In its center stood a pool of what looked like black glass, perfectly still despite the air currents. "Hollow Creek sits atop a thin place," it continued. "A place where the membrane between worlds stretches fragile as gossamer. The rules maintain that fragility, prevent further tearing." "So the rules protect the town?" I tried to reconcile this with what I'd learned so far. "The rules protect both sides." The Hollow Man circled the black pool. "Without them, what dwells in my realm would pour through. Without them, more of your kind would blunder into places they don't belong." One limb gestured at me, "Like you have done." "I came for the boy," I said firmly. "No." The faceless head turned toward me. "You came for answers. The child was merely your excuse." It wasn't wrong. The Miller boy had given me the courage to enter, but I'd been drawn to the door by something deeper, a need to understand what gripped this town in fear. "What's the site?" I asked. Margaret said I have it, like Harold did. "Seers," the Hollow Man said, the word carrying a weight of reverence. "Rare individuals who perceive the thinness of the veil, who see us when we move between." It drifted closer. Harold Holloway was the last. When he died, the balance faltered. Rules were forgotten. The boundary began to weaken. Until I arrived, I finished, realization dawning. "Until you arrived," it confirmed. "Drawn here by forces you don't understand. Your failed marriage, your need for escape, all orchestrated to bring you to Hollow Creek." Anger flared in my chest. "You're saying my life fell apart because of you? Because of this town?" "Your life fell apart because you were needed here." A ripple moved across its blank face, almost like expression. The price of being a seer. I thought of Margaret's words. That's why you were hired, why you were chosen. She'd known all along. Show me the boy, I demanded. The hollow man gestured to the black pool. Look. I approached cautiously, gun still trained on the entity. The surface of the pool shifted, and an image formed. The Miller boy, curled up asleep on what looked like a bed of moss, unharmed but pale. He broke a rule, the hollow man said. Children who see us directly must cross over temporarily. It maintains the boundary. How temporary? That depends on you. The entity circled behind me. Hollow Creek needs a new rule keeper, one with the sight, one who understands both sides of the boundary. And if I refuse, then the boy stays, and others will follow. Its tone remained neutral, matter of fact. The boundary continues to weaken. More will cross through. More will see what should remain unseen. I lowered my gun slowly, mind racing. What exactly does a rule keeper do? Enforce the rules, add new ones as needed, ensure the boundary holds. It extended one long-fingered hand. Accept, and the boy returns. Decline, and the consequences fall on Hollow Creek. Classic manipulation, holding an innocent hostage to force compliance. Yet I couldn't deny the truth in what it said. I'd seen the shadows at the edge of my vision since childhood, the strange figures no one else noticed, the movements in empty rooms. I'd always had the sight. I just never had a name for it. If I accept what happens to me, you remain as you are, deputy, protector, but with understanding. Its head tilted again. And responsibility. And the boy. How do I know you'll release him? The hollow man made a gesture over the pool. The image changed, showing the door I'd entered through, now standing ajar with the Miller boy stepping through it back into the forest. A gesture of good faith, it said. The boy returns now. Your decision comes after. How do I know this is real? That you've actually released him? The sight reveals truth as well as shadows, Deputy Carson. Look again. I stared into the pool, focusing not just on what I saw, but what I felt. A strange certainty settled over me. The boy was truly being released. I could feel it in the same way I'd sensed the shadow in my bathroom mirror, the presence in the trees at the barbecue. Even if I agree, I said carefully, I need to understand more. About the rules, about what's expected of me. Understanding comes with time. The hollow man gestured down a new corridor that hadn't been there moments before. First, you must meet the others. Others? Those who crossed over permanently. Those who broke rules that cannot be forgiven. It moved toward the corridor, including your predecessor. Harold Holloway is here. I followed, curiosity overriding caution. Harold, and many before him, all rule keepers eventually join us. The corridor led to another chamber, larger than the first. As we entered, I saw figures moving in the shadows. Human shapes, but wrong somehow. Stretched too tall, limbs too fluid, faces obscured in darkness. One stepped forward, and I recognized the distorted features of a much younger Harold Holloway. His face half melted into something resembling the hollow man. "Hello, Deputy Carson," he said, his voice an unsettling blend of human and other. "Margaret said you would come." "Margaret? She's here too?" Harold shook his head. "Not yet, but soon. She served her purpose." Another figure approached. This one I recognized as Deputy Miller, his transformation further along than Harold's, almost entirely featureless. "The rules," Miller said, voice gurgling as if through liquid, "are more than protection. They're preparation." Cold realization crept up my spine. Preparation for what? For joining us, the hollow man answered simply. For becoming boundary guardians. For transformation. I backed away, raising my gun again. That wasn't part of the deal. There was no deal, Deputy Carson. The hollow man's voice remained calm. Only inevitability. You saw the door. You used the key. You crossed the boundary. The transformation has already begun, Harold added, gesturing to my hands. I looked down and felt horror rise in my throat. My fingers had elongated, the skin turning pale and translucent. I hadn't felt it happening, but now that I saw it, a tingling sensation spread up my arms. I turned and ran, back toward the first chamber, searching desperately for the door that had disappeared. You cannot escape what you are, the hollow man called after me. Hollow Creek needs its rule keeper, and we need you. As I reached the wall where the door had been, my hands pressed against solid stone, now matching its texture beneath my touch. I was becoming part of this place, part of them. And somewhere in Hollow Creek, new rules were already being written. Panic clawed at my throat as I pressed against the unyielding stone. My elongated fingers scraped uselessly against the wall, leaving pale smears like condensation on cold glass. Behind me, I sensed, rather than heard, the others approaching. Harold, Miller, the Hollow Man, all waiting to welcome me into their grotesque family. I refused to accept this fate. There had to be a way out. A loophole in whatever cosmic contract I'd unwittingly signed by entering this place. The rules. It always came back to the rules. Wait, I called out, turning to face them. The rules apply to both sides, don't they? There are rules you have to follow too. The Hollow Man paused, its faceless head tilting with what might have been curiosity. Perceptive. Yes, the boundary demands balance, rules on both sides. Then I want to know your rules. All of them. I straightened, ignoring the crawling sensation of my skin stretching, rearranging. Before I become whatever this is, I deserve to know what I'm agreeing to. Harold and Miller exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. He's stalling, Miller gurgled. He's thinking, Harold countered, like a rule keeper should. The Hollow Man raised one of its many limbs, silencing them. Very well, Deputy Carson. Knowledge is your right as a seer. It gestured toward the black pool. Look and understand. I approached cautiously, weapon still drawn, though I doubted its effectiveness here. The pool's surface rippled without being touched, and images began to form, Hollow Creek in different eras, from frontier settlement to modern town, always with the same foreboding forest surrounding it. In 1887, miners broke through to our realm, the Hollow Man narrated. Before then, the boundary was intact. After, it required maintenance. The pool showed men in mining gear breaking through a rock wall, then fleeing in terror as something dark poured through the breach. Then a lone figure, a lawman with a star on his chest, standing at the mine entrance, negotiating with shadows. The first rule keeper, Harold explained, standing beside me now. Sheriff Thomas Jenkins. He established the covenant. 7 rules to start. The first seer. And what happened to him? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Harold gestured to a figure standing farther back in the shadows, more hollow man than human, barely recognizable as once having been a person. All rule keepers eventually join us, the hollow man repeated, but not before serving their purpose. The pool showed more images, different lawmen through different decades, all writing rules, all enforcing them, all eventually disappearing and being replaced. How long? I asked. How long do rule keepers have before this happens? Some years, some decades. The hollow man's voice was dispassionate. Harold served for 37 years. I fought it at the end, Harold said quietly. Tried to run. That's when things went wrong. Why we needed a new seer urgently. The pool's surface changed again, showing Harold running through the forest, pursued by shadowy figures. Then Margaret helping him hide, promising to find another with the sight. Harold growing ill, transforming even as he tried to resist. When rule keepers resist the inevitable, the boundary weakens, the Hollow Man explained. Things cross over that shouldn't. People disappear. The balance shifts. Like now, I realized. Because Harold resisted, because there was no rule keeper, things are crossing over, taking people. Yes, I studied my hands, now almost fully transformed, fingers elongated into graceful, inhuman digits, skin translucent enough to see the dark fluid pulsing beneath. If I accept this role, I said carefully, how do I get back? How do I function as a deputy if I look like this? I gestured to my changing body. The Hollow Man made a sound almost like laughter. The transformation is not yet complete, not irreversible. Accept your role, enforce the rules, and you may maintain your human appearance. For a time. Hope flickered, small but present. And the door? How do I get back to Hollow Creek? Intent and will. Once bound to us, you can create doors between. It extended a limb, dragging what looked like claws through the air itself. Reality tore open, revealing the forest where I'd entered. Like so. Beyond the tear, I saw the 2 oak trees, the night sky, the world I'd left behind. The Miller boy was indeed there, confused but alive, stumbling toward the lights of town visible in the distance. The boy is returned as promised, the Hollow Man stated. Your decision now, Deputy Carson. Accept your role willingly, or fight a transformation already underway. I stared through the tear in reality, mind racing. What exactly would be expected of me as rule keeper? Maintain the rules, add new ones when necessary, protect the boundary, keep your towns safe from what lies beyond. Harold stepped closer. It's not so different from being a deputy, just with higher stakes. And for how long? Until your successor is found. Until you join us completely. The Hollow Man's voice softened somehow. It is not a curse, deputy. It is evolution. Transcendence. My options were limited. The transformation had already begun. I could feel it spreading through me, rewriting what I was on a cellular level. Fighting seemed futile. Harold had tried and failed. But acceptance felt like surrender. There must be another way, I insisted. Some alternative that doesn't end with everyone becoming this. The boundary requires maintenance, the Hollow Man stated simply. The price has always been the same. I took a step toward the tear in reality, testing. None of them moved to stop me. If I accept the role, I can leave, return to Hollow Creek. Yes, to fulfill your duties. And if I add a new rule, now, as rule keeper? Interest seemed to emanate from the Hollow Man, despite its lack of expression. You understand quickly. Yes, that is your right. I took a deep breath. Decision forming. Then, here's my first new rule. The Hollow Man must answer one question from the rule keeper with absolute truth whenever asked. Silence fell over the chamber. The other transformed figures shifted uneasily. Clever, the Hollow Man finally said. But rules must serve the boundary, not personal curiosity. This does serve the boundary, I argued. A rule keeper who understands fully can better protect both sides. Harold made a strange sound, almost a laugh. He has you there. The boy thinks like a rule keeper already. After what felt like an eternity, the Hollow Man inclined its head. Accepted. One truthful answer whenever asked. Choose your questions wisely. I accept the role of rule keeper, I said, the words feeling like chains locking around me. Now, my first question. Is there a way to permanently repair the boundary without the transformation of rule keepers? The hollow man went utterly still. Even the strange fluid beneath its skin seemed to stop moving. When it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. Yes, the original breach could be sealed with a willing sacrifice of one who exists on both sides, one partially transformed like yourself, but who chooses oblivion rather than completion. Cold understanding washed over me, a loophole, a way out. Not for me, but perhaps for future rule keepers, for Hollow Creek itself. "Thank you for your honesty," I said quietly. "Now, I'm going back to do my job." I stepped through the Terran reality before anyone could respond, feeling the strange sensation of passing through dimensions. Cold forest air hit my lungs like a shock, and I gasped, falling to my knees on the damp earth. Looking down at my hands, I saw they remained transformed, elongated, pale, inhuman. But the rest of me felt normal, at least for now. I pulled my jacket sleeves down to cover them and struggled to my feet. The Miller boy was gone, hopefully safely on his way home. I needed to get back to town, figure out what came next, how to explain my altered appearance, how to function as a rule keeper, how to eventually sacrifice myself to permanently seal the breach. I hiked back to my car, mind churning with revelations. By the time I reached town, it was well past midnight. Lights still burned at the sheriff's station. The search for Miller must be ongoing. I parked a block away, not ready to face Caldwell or explain my transformation. As I sat gathering my thoughts, headlights swept across my rearview mirror. A patrol car pulled up behind me. Caldwell. He approached slowly, flashlight sweeping across my vehicle. I considered hiding my hands. But what was the point? He'd find out eventually. I rolled down my window as he reached it. Carson. His flashlight deliberately pointed at the ground, not at me. "The Miller boy returned 30 minutes ago. Said a man helped him escape the forest. Said the man had long, strange hands." I swallowed hard. "Sir, I can explain." "No need." He finally raised the light, illuminating my face but carefully avoiding my hands. Harold looked the same way when he first accepted the role. I stared at him, understanding dawning. "You knew, all along." "I'm the sheriff. I know all the rules, even the unwritten ones." His weathered face was grim in the harsh light. "Every town needs a rule keeper, and every rule keeper needs support. Did you know about the transformation? What happens in the end?" He nodded slowly. "Harold told me, toward the end, when he started fighting it." "And you still let me take this job, knowing what would happen?" Anger flared hot and bright. We needed someone with the sight. The boundary was weakening. People were disappearing. His expression hardened. One life for many. That's always been the bargain. One life? I laughed bitterly, showing him my transformed hands. "Look at me, Sheriff. This isn't life. This is something else entirely." "You still have time," he said quietly. "Years, probably." Harold managed almost 4 decades before the changes became problematic. 4 decades of watching myself slowly transform into something inhuman, of knowing my fate was sealed, of enforcing rules that would eventually claim other lives. Unless I found another way. Unless the sacrifice the Hollow Man mentioned could truly end this cycle. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you come back to work. We tell people you found the Miller boy. You start learning what it means to be the rule keeper." Caldwell's eyes reflected a deep sadness. "And I help you hide what you're becoming for as long as possible. And if I don't want this, if I fight it like Harold did, then more people disappear. The boundary weakens further. Eventually, What's on the other side comes through completely. He leaned closer. You've seen what's waiting. Do you want that for Hollow Creek? I flexed my transformed fingers, watching the strange movement beneath the translucent skin. No, but I don't want this for myself either. Sometimes we don't get to choose our purpose, Carson, just how well we fulfill it. He straightened up. Follow me back to the station. We've got work to do. As I started my car, a cold certainty settled in my bones. I would be the last rule keeper of Hollow Creek. One way or another, I would end this cycle, even if it cost me whatever remained of my humanity. Because some rules were meant to be broken, even if breaking them carried the ultimate price. My first day back at the station felt like walking into a dream. Deputies nodded respectfully as I passed, a stark contrast to the wariness they'd shown before. News of my role in Miller Boy's return had spread quickly, though the details remained purposefully vague. Sheriff Caldwell had worked out our cover story. I'd found the boy wandering in the woods, disoriented but unharmed. No mention of doors between worlds or faceless entities. No mention of my hands, now permanently concealed in leather gloves that Caldwell had provided. Harold wore them too, he'd said, handing them over. Told everyone he had a skin condition. My desk held a new edition, a leather-bound journal identical to the rules notebook, but with blank pages. For the new rules, Caldwell explained quietly. When you sense them, write them down. The old rule keeper's journals are in my office safe if you need reference. The transformation had brought certain abilities. I could sense disturbances in what the Hollow Man had called the boundary. Little ripples of wrongness that prickled across my altered skin. The first time it happened, a sudden cold sensation while driving patrol, I nearly crashed the cruiser. You'll get used to it, Ramirez assured me when I returned to the station, pale and shaken. He was the only other deputy Caldwell had briefed on my new role. Harold said it was like developing a new sense, like suddenly being able to smell after a lifetime without it. You knew Harold well? I asked, studying him. Ramirez nodded. My father was his deputy. I grew up with the rules. When Dad died, natural causes thankfully, I took his place. He leaned closer. I've been waiting for the new rule keeper. Things have been slipping through since Harold transformed. Transformed, I repeated bitterly. You mean since he became one of them? Ramirez's expression darkened. It's the price, Carson. Always has been. Maybe it doesn't have to be. His eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? Before I could answer, dispatch called in a situation at Hollow Creek Elementary. Strange noises from the boiler room. Maintenance staff afraid to investigate. Rule number 8. If unusual sounds come from beneath the school, evacuate the building immediately. Call the sheriff's office directly, not 911. My first official duty as rule keeper. At the school, Principal Davis met us at the entrance, face drawn with worry. It started about an hour ago, she explained, leading Ramirez and me through empty corridors. Like scratching, then whispering, getting louder. I remembered the rule and got everyone out. You did the right thing, I assured her. The boiler room door stood at the end of a dimly lit hallway, unremarkable, except for the cold dread emanating from it. I could feel the boundary thinning here, like tissue paper stretched to transparency. Stay here, I told Ramirez, pulling out my weapon. But Rule Keeper handles these situations alone, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Knowledge that wasn't mine seemed to surface when needed. A gift, or curse, of my new role. The boiler room was standard school infrastructure, hulking metal equipment, pipes snaking along walls, concrete floor stained with decades of grime. The scratching sound came from behind the largest boiler, accompanied by whispers in a language that hurt my ears. As I approached, the whispers stopped. Something moved in the shadows. I know you're there, I called, my transformed hands tingling beneath the leather gloves. You've crossed where you shouldn't. A creature emerged, vaguely humanoid, but wrong in fundamental ways. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, its skin rippled like disturbed water, and its face. I forced myself to look away before my mind could fully process what I was seeing. Hungry, it gurgled. Lost. Understanding flooded me, not from training or experience, but from whatever changes the Hollow Man had wrought in me. This wasn't a malevolent entity, just a lost one. It had slipped through a weak point in the boundary, drawn by the concentrated energy of hundreds of children. I holstered my weapon and removed my right glove, revealing my transformed hand. You don't belong here, I said gently. Let me help you return. The creature stilled, recognizing something in me. Keeper, it whispered. Yes, I can open the way back. Without conscious thought, I knew what to do. I pressed my altered hand against the wall, feeling for the thin spot in the boundary. There, a place where reality felt stretched and worn. I dragged my elongated fingers downward, tearing open a small rift that revealed swirling darkness beyond. Go, I urged the creature, before the boundary hardens. It scuttled forward, pausing before the rift. Gratitude, Keeper, warning. Others coming, bigger, hungrier. Then it slipped through, and I sealed the tear with another gesture, my skin burning from the effort. When I emerged from the boiler room, Ramirez stared at me with naked awe. You sent it back, he said. Harold always had to call for backup when things came through. I pulled my glove back on, hiding the evidence of what I was becoming. It was just lost. They're not all dangerous. But some are, Ramirez said grimly. And according to what you just heard, more are coming. Back at the station, I reported to Caldwell, explaining about the weakening boundary beneath the school. We'll need a new rule, he decided, sliding Harold's old journals across his desk. See how the others handled similar situations. I spent hours poring over the journals of previous rule keepers, ostensibly searching for precedent for school incursions, but actually hunting for information about the original breach, the mine where it all began. The older journals contained tantalizing fragments. Sheriff Jenkins, the first rule keeper, had written of sealing attempts that failed. Another from the 1920s mentioned blood sacrifice rejected by the boundary. A rule. Keeper from the 1970s had apparently tried to collapse the mine entirely, only to find the physical entrance matters not. The tear exists independent of human architecture. Most enlightening was Harold's final entry, dated just weeks before his disappearance. The transformation accelerates. I can no longer hide my hands, and my face begins to smooth in areas. Margaret suggests amputation of the affected limbs, but I sense this would only redirect the change elsewhere. The boundary calls me to join those beyond. I've studied every account, every theory. The breach requires a sacrifice, yes, but not of blood or life alone. It requires liminality, existence in both states simultaneously. No fully human sacrifice will seal it. No fully transformed being will suffice. Only one caught between, willingly surrendering not to death, but to non-existence. I lack the courage. God forgive me, I cannot face oblivion. Better to become one of them than to be nothing at all. I closed the journal, a cold certainty settling over me. Harold had found the answer but couldn't bring himself to complete the sacrifice. He'd chosen transformation over obliteration. Could I make a different choice when the time came? That evening, I added a new rule to the book. If the school's boiler room emits any sound when the building is empty, do not investigate. Call the rule keeper immediately, regardless of hour. Simple, clear, a stitch in the weakening fabric of reality. As I wrote, My fingertips tingled painfully. The transformation was progressing, spreading up my arms beneath my sleeves. I rolled them back to find the translucent skin now reached my elbows, dark fluid pulsing beneath. "It's happening faster than it should," Margaret Holloway said. I jumped, nearly toppling my chair. She stood in my doorway, looking exactly as she had at the barbecue. Neat silver bun, cardigan buttoned to her throat. But something was different. Her eyes, previously clouded with cataracts, now gleamed with unnatural clarity. "Margaret? How did you—" I began. "There isn't much time," she interrupted, closing the door behind her. "The boundary is failing faster than anticipated. Your transformation accelerates to match. You know about the boundary? About what I've become?" A sad smile crossed her face. "I was married to Harold for 42 years, watched him change day by day." She sat across from me. "And now I'm changing too." She unbuttoned her cardigan, revealing skin similar to mine creeping up her neck from beneath her blouse. "How?" I whispered. "Proximity. Devotion. I don't have the sight, but I loved someone who did. It leaves its mark." She rebuttoned her cardigan with trembling fingers. "I know what you're planning. The sacrifice." I stiffened. "How could you possibly—" "Because Harold considered it too at the end. Found the answer in the oldest journals, the ones turned to dust decades ago." Her eyes held mine. "But there's something you should know. Something Harold discovered too late." "What's that?" "The sacrifice doesn't just require someone caught between human and other. It requires Hollow Creek itself to acknowledge the sacrifice." She leaned forward. "The town must willingly give up its protection. Every citizen must agree to face whatever comes after the boundary is sealed, without the rules to guide them." "That's impossible," I said. "Most people don't even know about the boundary, let alone the rules." "Precisely why all previous rule keepers failed." Margaret stood. "Find a way to make them understand what's at stake. Make them choose to give up their protection. Only then will your sacrifice seal the breach permanently." "And if I can't convince them?" Her expression softened with pity. "Then you'll become like Harold, like the others, and eventually, like me." She moved toward the door. "I'm leaving Hollow Creek tonight. When my transformation completes, I don't want to be found by those beyond the boundary. I've left something for you at my house. The back door is unlocked." After she left, I sat motionless, mind reeling. The task before me seemed impossible. Convince an entire town to give up supernatural protection they barely acknowledged, then sacrifice myself to permanently seal a century-old breach. But the alternative was worse. Endless cycles of rule keepers transforming. People disappearing when the rules failed. And eventually, if the Hollow Man was to be believed, complete collapse of the boundary. I had to try. Starting with the thing Margaret had left for me. As I drove to her house, my police radio crackled with an unusual call, reports of strange lights at the abandoned mine on the edge of town, the original breach point. The boundary was calling, and I had no choice but to answer. Margaret's cottage felt emptier than before, as if her essence had already departed along with her physical presence. The back door creaked open at my touch, revealing a kitchen frozen in time, dishes drying beside the sink, a half-empty cup of tea on the table, a napkin folded precisely beside it. On the kitchen table sat an old cigar box, its lid worn smooth from decades of handling. Inside lay a collection of seemingly random items. A tarnished miner's tag labeled T. Jenkins, a small vial of dark soil, a stone carved with symbols matching those in the Hollow Man's corridor, and a folded piece of yellowed paper. I carefully unfolded the paper. It contained a crude map of Hollow Creek and the surrounding area, with the mine clearly marked. 7 points were highlighted around town, forming a perfect heptagon with the mine at its center. Scrawled in faded handwriting at the bottom, The 7 seals binding the breach. Break these, and the town must face the truth. 7 seals, 7 original rules, according to Harold's journals. The pieces started clicking together in my mind. As I studied the map, my radio crackled again. Caldwell's voice, unusually tense. "Carson, report to the old mine immediately. Situation developing. Come alone." The transformation was accelerating. By the time I reached my cruiser, the translucent skin had crept past my elbows, spreading across my chest beneath my uniform. Each breath felt strange, as if my lungs were gradually becoming something else. I caught a glimpse of my face in the rearview mirror. My features remained human, but my eyes had changed, the irises expanding until barely any white remained. The mine sat on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and officially condemned. Chain-link fence surrounded the property, posted with weathered no trespassing signs. I pulled up to find Caldwell's truck already there, but no sign of the sheriff. The moment I stepped from the cruiser, I felt it. The boundary, paper-thin here, vibrating like a plucked string. The air itself seemed to bend around the mine entrance, a dark maw in the hillside barely visible in my headlights. "Sheriff?" I called, drawing my weapon more from habit than expectation it would help. No response, but a strange light pulsed from within the mine entrance, casting long shadows that moved unnaturally, disconnected from any visible source. Rule number 1, never enter the old mine shaft, even in daylight. What was trapped there is still hungry. The oldest rule, the first boundary, and I was about to break it. As I approached the entrance, my transformed skin tingled painfully, as if warning me away. The light inside pulsed again, not the harsh glare of electric lamps, but a soft, undulating glow like bioluminescence. "I wouldn't go in there if I were you," came a familiar voice. I spun to find Ramirez standing behind me, service weapon drawn. But he wasn't pointing it at the mine. He was aiming at me. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "Following you." His expression was grim. "After you left the station, Caldwell told me the truth about what you're planning, about the sacrifice. And I can't let you do it." Ramirez's hand was steady, his resolve clear. "The rules protect this town, have for generations. Without them, we're defenseless." "The rules are a bandage on a wound that needs stitches," I argued, taking a cautious step toward him. "Every rule keeper transforms. Every few decades, someone else gets sacrificed to this system. It has to end, Ramirez. Better one person every few decades than the whole town, exposed to whatever's on the other side," he countered. Caldwell agrees. So does the mayor, the council, everyone who knows the truth. Understanding dawned. "You never called this in, did you?" "Caldwell isn't coming." A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "I'm sorry, Carson, but you need to step away from the mine and come back to town. We'll figure something out for your condition. Harold managed for decades. You can too." The light from the mine pulsed brighter, and a low humming filled the air. The boundary was thinning with every passing minute. "It's too late for that," I said quietly, gesturing to my face, my hands. "The transformation is accelerating. Something's happening to the boundary. Can't you feel it?" Doubt crept into Ramirez's eyes. He could feel it too. The wrongness in the air, the sense of something massive shifting just beyond perception. That moment of hesitation was all I needed. I lunged forward, knocking his arm aside as the gun discharged harmlessly into the dirt. We grappled briefly before my transformed strength asserted itself, pinning him against my cruiser. "Listen to me," I growled, my voice taking on harmonics that weren't entirely human. "The boundary is failing, with or without the rules. The Hollow Man told me so. This isn't about one sacrifice anymore. It's about preventing something much worse. What could be worse than losing our protection? Ramirez gasped. Total collapse. I released him, stepping back. If the boundary fails completely, there's no barrier between worlds, no rules to follow for safety, just chaos. The mind pulsed again, the light now streaming out continuously. A sound like distant chanting emanated from deep within. Go back to town, I ordered. Tell Caldwell what's happening. Get people to safety, the school, the church, anywhere with strong rules already in place. And you, I turned toward the mine entrance. I'm going to do what should have been done in 1887. Ramirez hesitated, then nodded once. Good luck, Rule Keeper. He climbed into his cruiser and sped away. Alone now, I faced the mine. Margaret's map had shown 7 points forming a heptagon around town, the 7 seals she mentioned. If I understood correctly, those seals were physical anchors for the original rules, the ones that formed the initial boundary after the breach. To convince the town to give up its protection, I needed to break those seals, make the invisible visible, force them to confront the truth. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The mine entrance yawned before me, dark, despite the pulsing light within. As I stepped inside, the air grew dense, pressing against my skin like deep water. The tunnel sloped downward, old support beams groaning overhead, despite no physical weight pressing on them. The light emanated from farther in, around a bend. As I followed it, the walls began to change, rock giving way to something organic, pulsing, alive. The same symbols I'd seen in the Hollow Man's realm carved themselves into the living tissue before my eyes. I came to a chamber where the mine shaft ended abruptly at a wall of pure light. A vertical pool similar to the one in the Hollow Man's domain. Before it stood Sheriff Caldwell, his back to me, speaking to the light. Becoming unmanageable, he was saying. The new keeper moves too quickly, suspects too much. Your concerns are noted, Guardian Caldwell, replied a voice I recognized. The Hollow Man, speaking through the light. But the acceleration cannot be stopped. The old bargain weakens. Then make a new bargain, Caldwell pleaded. This town has served faithfully for generations. We've provided rule keepers, maintained the boundary. The breach widens beyond our control. The Hollow Man stated, your keeper's transformation hastens because the boundary calls for him to cross over fully. I stepped forward, boots scraping on the stone floor. Caldwell whirled, shock and then resignation crossing his face. You lied to me, I said simply. You're not just aware of them. You work for them, not for with. Caldwell's shoulders sagged. Someone has to maintain the human side of the boundary, pass down the knowledge, find new keepers when needed. Guardian, the Hollow Man acknowledged me through the light. You have questions. Why is the boundary failing now after all this time? The original bargain required regular renewal. A new keeper accepting the role willingly, without full understanding of the consequences. The light pulsed with each word. Harold Holloway was the last to do so. You accepted with knowledge of your fate. The bargain weakens. And the 7 seals Margaret mentioned? Caldwell's head snapped up. She showed you the map. Not a question. The Hollow Man's light dimmed slightly. The physical anchors of the original rules. Break them, and the rules lose power. The town loses protection. And faces the truth, I finished. Yes. I turned to Caldwell. You've been lying to this town for generations, sacrificing deputies to maintain this prison. Prison? Caldwell laughed bitterly. Look around you, Carson. We're not the jailers here. We're the inmates. The boundary doesn't just keep them out. It keeps us in. A cold realization washed over me. Hollow Creek isn't just built on a thin spot between worlds. It's built on a containment zone. We're the experiment. The light pulsed brighter. Perceptive, Guardian. Your transformation brings understanding. I looked down at my hands, now completely transformed, the skin transparent enough to see the dark substance that had replaced my blood. The change had reached my neck, creeping up my jaw. Soon my face would smooth over. I would become like Harold, like Miller, another guardian of a boundary designed not to protect humans, but to study them. The sacrifice, I said, turning back to the light. If I break the seals, expose the truth to the town, and they choose to give up their protection, my sacrifice would end this, permanently. It would collapse this particular experiment, the Hollow Man confirmed. This pocket of shared reality would dissolve. Hollow Creek would rejoin the greater world, unbound by our rules. And its people? Would they survive? Those not already touched by transformation, yes. Caldwell stepped between me and the light. You can't do this, Carson. The town isn't ready. They won't understand what they're giving up. That's exactly why they need to know, I countered. Generations living under rules they don't understand, people disappearing, deputies transforming into whatever I'm becoming. It has to end. The ground beneath us trembled, and the light pulsed erratically. The Hollow Man's voice took on urgency. The boundary fractures. Choose quickly, Guardian. Transformation or revelation. I made my choice in that moment, looking at Caldwell's fearful face, feeling the inhuman blood pulsing through my veins. I choose revelation, I declared, turning toward the mine entrance. I'm breaking the seals. All of them. As I strode from the chamber, Caldwell called after me. Carson, if you do this, they'll try to stop you. The other guardians, the ones who know the truth. I paused without turning. Let them try. Outside, the night sky had changed. Lights rippled across it like aurora borealis. But wrong. Too angular. Too purposeful. The boundary was becoming visible even to those without the sight. I needed to move quickly. Find the 7 seals. Break them. And then return to the mine for the final sacrifice. The town needed to face the truth. And I needed to end this century-long deception, even if it cost me everything I was or would ever be. 6 months later, the young reporter adjusted her recorder, eyeing the elderly man across from her with barely concealed skepticism. They sat in a diner off the interstate, miles from where Hollow Creek had once stood. So you're saying the entire town just disappeared? She asked. The man, former mayor of Hollow Creek, nodded slowly, his hands trembling around his coffee cup. Not all at once. It started with the seals. The seals, she repeated flatly. 7 of them. Old structures around town, the founder's statue in the park, the cornerstone of the church, the school's bell tower, and others. His eyes took on a distant look. When Deputy Carson broke the first one, the statue, it melted, just dissolved into nothing, and suddenly everyone could see them. See what? The things that had always been there, the boundaries, the doors between. He shuddered. The air rippled like heat waves, but cold. So cold. And we saw glimpses of the other side. Of them. The reporter made a note, humoring him. Then what happened? Carson called a town meeting, showed us his hands, his face, half transformed by then. Told us everything. About the mine, the experiment, the rule keepers. The mayor's voice dropped. The sacrifice. And people believed him. How could we not? The sky was wrong. Things moved in broad daylight that shouldn't exist. The rules that had protected us were failing before our eyes. He took a shaky breath. He said, we had a choice. Continue the experiment, find a new rule keeper when he was gone, or end it. Give up our protection and face whatever came after. What did the town choose? Some wanted to maintain the rules. The guardians, they called themselves. Caldwell, the principal, others who'd known the truth for generations. His gaze drifted to the window. But most of us, we'd seen enough, lost enough. When Carson asked who wanted freedom, nearly everyone raised their hands. Then Carson disappeared? A nod. Back to the mine. Those who followed him said there was a light, brighter than the sun. When it faded, the mine entrance had collapsed. But it wasn't over. The mayor's hands shook harder. The effects spread outward. Day by day, Hollow Creek began to fade. Buildings became transparent. People unaffected by the transformation, most of us, found themselves naturally leaving, finding reasons to go elsewhere. Within weeks, the town was empty. And now there's nothing there, the reporter said, not bothering to hide her disbelief. Go see for yourself. He slid a map across the table. The town's gone, but the land remains. No trace of buildings, roads, nothing. As if Hollow Creek never existed. And the people? The former residents? Scattered, living normal lives. But we remember, even if the rest of the world never knew we existed. He met her eyes directly. Carson saved us, freed us from rules we never consented to follow, sacrificed himself to end an experiment that had claimed generations. The reporter gathered her notes, thanking the man for his time while mentally filing the story under local folklore. Interesting, but unpublishable. As she left the diner, she didn't notice the elderly man watching her through the window. Didn't see him pull off gloves to reveal hands with elongated fingers and translucent skin. Didn't hear him whisper, "Some rules can never be broken. Only bent." Miles away, at the coordinates where Hollow Creek should have been, a forest grew. At its center, unmarked and unremembered, a single wooden door stood between two oak trees. No walls, no building, just a door. And if you pressed your ear against it, you might hear Deputy James Carson whispering new rules for a new experiment, one with free consent, fair warning, and no sacrifices required. Some say, if you knock 3 times and turn the handle, he'll let you in. Others insist the door should never be opened, but that's the beauty of Carson's final rule, the one that saved and doomed him simultaneously. Now, we get to choose which rules to follow and which to break.